Welcome to a place where courage meets chaos, where every heartbeat could be your last and silence is never safe. This is not just another zombie story, this is a gripping journey into a city frozen in fear where the infected roam freely and only the bravest dare to step forward. Imagine waking up to a world where the once vibrant streets are now echoing with whispers of the dead, where towering buildings are nothing but hollow shells and where each corner could hide a nightmare. This is the world our characters find themselves in, a place where survival is not just about strength but about spirit. If you are someone who loves thrilling suspense, if you are drawn to gripping battles between the living and the undead, and if you crave the tension of life and death decisions, then this story is made for you. Over 4 parts we will follow the journey of survivors who refuse to give up, who fight for more than survival, and who walk among the infected with a purpose. So make sure to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of this intense adventure. The smell of smoke and rot clung to the air like a warning, drifting through the cracked windows of long-abandoned buildings. Sidewalks once bustling with people now lay hidden beneath layers of dust and fallen leaves. Time had stopped in this place. The silence was not peaceful but dreadful, interrupted only by the occasional groan of something not quite alive. Zane moved through the empty streets with the caution of someone who had seen too much. He held his blade tightly low to the ground like a shadow slipping between buildings. His eyes scanned every rooftop, every alley, every flicker of movement. He had lost enough to know that hesitation was fatal. He had been a paramedic before the outbreak, the kind of man who ran toward chaos, not away from it. Now he was something else, a scout for a small group of survivors who lived underground in a converted metro station. They called it the Hive. It was safe for now, but food was running low and the infected were getting smarter. Zane turned the corner and spotted the gas station. He remembered it from before, a rundown place with flickering neon signs and overpriced snacks. Now it looked like a war zone. The glass was shattered and the shelves stripped bare, but he knew there was a storage room in the back. Maybe, just maybe, something useful had been missed. He moved quickly but silently, ducking under broken beams and stepping over bodies too decayed to recognize. He reached the door at the back. It was slightly ajar and his heart pounded as he pushed it open slowly. Inside, darkness and the scent of mildew, but also crates stacked against the far wall. He began rummaging through them, canned goods, batteries, even a water filter. It was a miracle. Then he heard it, the faint shuffle of feet on tile, slow, deliberate. It was not the sound of the living. He froze, crouched low behind a crate, listening. The sound grew closer, a soft groan followed it, then the dragging of a foot. The infected were near. Zane drew his blade again, his breath shallow. He could make it out the door if he was quiet enough, but the supplies were too important. The Hive needed them. He inched toward the exit, peeking out carefully, and there it was, a tall man, once perhaps a security guard, now twisted and hollow, with grayish skin and eyes that seemed to search for anything warm, anything human. He threw a piece of debris across the room. It landed with a crash and the infected turned, instantly stumbling toward the sound. Zane moved the other way, fast and light, through the door and into the open again, heart pounding. He didn't stop until he was half a block away, hidden inside a collapsed diner. He took a breath and leaned against the wall, staring at the supplies in his bag. It had been a good run, but close, too close. The infected were adapting, becoming harder to distract, harder to outrun. He didn't know how much longer the Hive would last if things kept changing this fast. As he sat there planning his next move, he heard something new, a voice, distant but real. It was a girl calling out quietly for help. Zane's blood ran cold. No one sane would shout in this city unless they were desperate or reckless. Either way, he had a choice: stay hidden or risk everything again, because someone might still be out there waiting to be saved, or waiting to trap the next fool who dared to care. What choice would he make? The silence offered no answer, only the distant groan of the city that had long forgotten mercy. The decision haunted Zane as he sat motionless in the darkened diner, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew the risks better than anyone. The city was no place for hope, but the voice had sounded so real, so filled with desperation. If it was a trap, he could end up as just another body for the infected to feed on, but if it wasn't, it could be a life saved, a small spark of hope in a world where hope was fading fast. He rose to his feet, the weight of his decision pressing down on him harder than any fight he had ever faced. He couldn't just ignore the plea for help. Even if it was a trap, he had to know if there was still something worth fighting for. He moved quickly through the ruined streets, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The infected could be anywhere, but he had to keep his focus on the sound of the voice, now more distant but still faintly audible. He wasn't sure how far he had walked when the voice came again, louder this time and unmistakable. It was a girl pleading for someone to come and help her. Zane's heart raced as he followed the sound of her voice, weaving through the twisted remains of the city, desperate to reach her in time. As he rounded a corner, his breath caught in his throat. The girl was standing in the middle of the street, hands tied behind her back and surrounded by 3 infected. They shuffled toward her, their decayed bodies barely held together by rotting flesh. She didn't seem to notice them. She was staring straight ahead, her eyes wide with fear. Zane knew he had no time to waste. He wasn't sure how much longer she would be able to survive before the infected reached her, but he couldn't let that happen, not if there was a chance to save her. He took a deep breath and moved in silently. The infected were slow, but they had the advantage in numbers. Zane had to act fast or risk losing her forever. He picked up a large piece of metal from the ground and hurled it at the farthest infected. The sound of it hitting the pavement made them all turn their decayed faces toward him. Zane used the distraction to slip behind the girl and cut through the ropes binding her hands. She looked up in shock as the ropes fell away, her eyes wild with fear but also with a flicker of recognition. She had been watching him the entire time. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "I thought no one was coming. I thought I was going to die here." Zane didn't have time for words. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward him. As the infected moved closer, he could feel the pressure building, the tension tightening around them. Every second was precious now. They had to get away before the infected closed in. He pushed her forward, urging her to run ahead of him, but she stumbled, her legs shaky from exhaustion. Zane cursed under his breath and pulled her up with a firm grip, urging her forward. They were just a few steps from an alleyway when one of the infected lunged toward them. It was a woman, once a mother perhaps, but now nothing more than a snarling beast. Her hands reached for the girl's throat. Zane acted without thinking. He slammed the butt of his blade into the woman's skull, sending her crumpling to the ground with a sickening thud. The sound echoed in the streets, but they couldn't afford to linger. "Move!" Zane shouted, pushing the girl into the alleyway. He glanced back at the remaining infected who were now focused on the fresh kill, their attention diverted long enough for Zane to pull the girl deeper into the shadows. They needed to find shelter fast. They ran through the maze of alleys until they reached a narrow opening leading into a darkened warehouse. Zane ushered her inside quickly and slammed the door shut behind them. Panting with exertion, they were safe for now, but only just. The girl sank to the ground, her breath ragged and her face pale. She looked up at Zane with wide eyes. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Why did you do that? Why risk your life for a stranger?" Zane leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath as he looked at her, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. He wasn't sure how to answer her. It wasn't just about saving her, it was about something deeper, something that had been growing inside him since the outbreak began, the desire to protect, to fight for more than just survival. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm, "Because we're not just surviving, we're fighting for something better, something worth living for." The girl stared at him for a moment as if trying to understand, then her lips curled into a small but genuine smile. "My name's Mia," she said softly, "and I'll fight with you whatever it takes." Zane felt a flicker of something inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The weight of hope settled over Zane in an unexpected but comforting way. He had never allowed himself to think about the possibility of rebuilding or finding purpose beyond survival. The world had changed too much, and yet Mia's words had stirred something deep within him, something that had been buried beneath the constant struggle to stay alive. They sat in silence for a moment as the sounds of the city filtered through the cracks of the warehouse, the distant groans of the infected, a reminder that the world outside was still a place of chaos and death, but in this small corner of the city there was a sense of calm, a brief respite from the horrors that had taken over everything. Mia broke the silence first, her voice soft but steady. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her eyes fixed on Zane. Zane thought for a moment as he glanced out the small window that overlooked the ruins of the city. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the broken buildings below. He had no clear answer, but one thing was certain: they couldn't stay in the warehouse forever. They needed to find more survivors, they needed to keep moving forward. "We head to the hive," Zane said after a moment, his tone firm. "It's a safe place for now, but it's running out of supplies and we need more people to help fight back." Mia nodded quietly, looking out the window as well, her face thoughtful. She hadn't said much about herself since they'd met, but Zane could tell she was strong. She had survived the outbreak for this long on her own, which meant she had the skills to make it even further if she chose to. "We'll need a plan," Mia said finally, her voice determined. "We can't just walk in there expecting it to be easy." Zane agreed fully. He had already learned the hard way that nothing in this new world was easy, and survival meant being prepared for anything. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. "We'll move at night," he said, "that way we can avoid the main roads. The infected are drawn to the light, but we'll have the cover of darkness on our side. We'll take what we need from the stores along the way and move quickly." Mia stood up with renewed energy, a fire in her eyes. "I'm in," she said simply. "We'll do whatever it takes." Zane watched her for a moment before standing up as well. The quiet confidence in her voice was contagious, and for the first time in a long while he felt like they might actually stand a chance. The odds were still stacked against them, but he wasn't alone anymore. They spent the rest of the night preparing, making sure they had enough supplies to last them through the journey. Zane checked his weapons and gear, making sure everything was in working order, while Mia gathered what she could from the warehouse, taking stock of the food and water they had. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the warehouse, Zane felt the tension build once again. They couldn't afford to stay here any longer, they had to move. "We leave in 10 minutes, he said as he checked the map they had managed to salvage from one of the nearby offices. He marked the route they would take, trying to avoid the largest concentrations of infected. The path would be dangerous, but it was their best shot. Mia gave him a nod and started gathering her things. She moved with a quiet efficiency that Zane appreciated. He wasn't used to working with someone else not like this, but he had to admit she was a good partner, someone who wasn't just trying to survive but who was actively trying to make it through together. 10 minutes later they were on the move. The streets were eerily quiet in the early morning light, the city still trapped in a state of uneasy silence. Zane kept his head down as they moved quickly through the alleys, the sense of urgency never leaving his chest. It wasn't long before they encountered their first obstacle, a group of infected clustered around the entrance to a convenience store. They were mindlessly shuffling around the doorway, their vacant eyes scanning the area as if searching for prey. Zane motioned for Mia to stay back and crept forward with the stealth of someone who had learned how to move undetected in this new world. He had done this 100 times before, but now it was different. Now he had someone to protect. Mia watched from the shadows as Zane carefully positioned himself behind a dumpster, his grip tight on his blade. He waited for the right moment before silently slipping past the infected and into the store. Zane quickly grabbed what he could from the shelves, cans of food, bottles of water, anything that might be useful. They didn't have time to be picky, they needed to get in and out before the infected realized they were there. As Zane made his way back to Mia with the supplies, he saw something that stopped him cold, a figure in the distance moving toward them. It was a person, but not one Zane recognized. The figure was dressed in tattered clothing and moved with the stiff, jerky motions of someone who had been surviving on the edge for too long. Zane instinctively reached for his blade, his heart pounding as the figure got closer, but as it neared he saw something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a human at all, it was something far worse, an infected that had somehow retained some semblance of its former humanity. Its eyes were wild but still held a spark of intelligence. Zane's mind raced. This wasn't just any infected, this was something else, something different, something smarter. Zane's instincts kicked in, his blade already halfway out of its sheath, but he hesitated for a fraction of a second. This wasn't like the others. This infected moved with a purpose, its eyes scanning the area, its head turning slowly, as if aware of its surroundings. It wasn't just a mindless creature hunting for flesh, it was something more dangerous. It was a thinking, calculating predator. Mia noticed Zane's hesitation, her eyes following his gaze. She stepped back instinctively, her hand on the small knife she had managed to scavenge, ready to defend herself. But she, too, saw what Zane had noticed. The infected wasn't stumbling or aimlessly shuffling like the others. It was focused, its gaze sharp, almost aware. "This isn't right," Zane muttered under his breath, his voice tight with tension. "It's different." Mia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "What do we do?" Zane didn't take his eyes off the creature. The infected figure was now closer, its movements more deliberate, more controlled than any of the others Zane had encountered. It stopped about 20 feet away, its gaze locking onto Zane for a brief moment before it slowly turned toward Mia. It tilted its head slightly as if studying them, and then, without warning, it broke into a slow, measured sprint. Zane acted on reflex, grabbing Mia by the arm and yanking her behind the dumpster for cover. The infected figure was fast, much faster than Zane had anticipated. It charged toward them with an eerie precision, its long limbs propelling it with terrifying speed. Zane cursed under his breath, realizing they had underestimated the threat they were facing. "Stay low," Zane hissed, his heart racing. Mia crouched down, her breathing shallow. The infected was getting closer by the second, and Zane knew they had only moments before it was upon them. He pulled Mia closer, pressing her into the shadowed corner behind the dumpster. His mind raced through their options, but none of them seemed good. Fighting this creature head-on would be a death sentence. They needed to outsmart it, but how? Zane peeked around the corner, just in time to see the creature stop. It was only a few feet away now, standing still as if it had suddenly sensed their hiding place. It sniffed the air, its movement stiff and unnatural, before it began to move in their direction again. But this time, it was slower, more methodical. It was testing the area, calculating its next move. Zane's hand gripped his blade tighter, but he didn't make a move. He needed to wait, to let the creature get close enough. He knew if they stayed hidden long enough, there was a chance they could slip past it, if they were lucky. "On my count," Zane whispered to Mia, his voice barely audible. "We make a run for it." Straight down the alley to the next block. Don't look back. Mia nodded, her eyes wide with fear but also determination. They both knew the stakes. If they failed, they wouldn't make it out alive. Zane took a deep breath, watching the infected as it came closer, its eyes scanning the ground, seemingly unaware of the hiding pair just a few feet away. Its body was tense, ready to spring, but it moved with the caution of something that had learned the art of hunting. Zane's heart pounded as he counted silently in his head. 3, 2, 1. Without another second of hesitation, Zane grabbed Mia's wrist and pulled her to her feet, running full speed toward the next alley. They moved like shadows, dodging debris and broken glass, keeping as quiet as possible. The infected, sensing their movement, let out a guttural growl and sprinted after them, faster than before, but still behind. Zane's mind was on nothing but the path ahead, his legs pumping as hard as they could, pushing him faster with every stride. Mia was keeping up, but Zane could hear her heavy breathing, and he knew that if they didn't find cover soon, they would be caught. The infected wasn't far behind now, its growls echoing in the silence of the city. As they reached the next block, Zane spotted an old parking garage ahead. He pulled Mia toward it, diving into the shadows of the building just as the infected rounded the corner. The creature skidded to a stop, its feet scraping against the pavement as it sniffed the air once more, its senses sharp, its mind working to track them. Zane pressed his back against the cold, concrete wall of the parking garage, breathing heavily, his heart still racing. Mia crouched next to him, her eyes wide with fear. They were safe, for now, but Zane knew they couldn't stay here long. The infected had learned their scent, and it wouldn't stop until it found them. Worse, if there were more of these smarter infected, it meant the city was becoming more dangerous by the day. Zane's mind was already working on their next move. They couldn't stay in the parking garage for long. They needed to find a way to lose the infected, to make it to the hive without drawing attention. We can't stay here, Zane muttered, glancing at Mia. We need to move again, but we have to be careful. These infected are learning. They're adapting. Mia nodded, her eyes focused on the path ahead. We're not giving up, right? She asked, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. Zane met her gaze. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep running, how much longer they could survive in a city that seemed to be evolving alongside the infected. But one thing was certain, they weren't giving up. Not now, not ever. They had already faced too much to turn back. We keep fighting, Zane said quietly. We keep moving forward. For as long as we can. The silence in the parking garage was deafening, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. But outside, the city was still waiting, full of threats, full of dangers, but full of life, too, if they could make it. They had come this far. They would go further. And they would face whatever came next, together.